We are in the book of Ruth. Let's pray together. Our God and our Father, we're so thankful for another first day of the week. We're thankful for the blessings of the past week physically, but more importantly, we're thankful for the relationship that we have with you that has been sustained throughout this past week, and for the blessings that lie therein. We're thankful for the time we have now to study from your word. As we look back, Holy Father, to the things that happened long ago during the time in which Ruth and Naomi lived and Boaz, we pray that you would help us as we study these things to better understand them, but more importantly, to glean, Holy Father, the lessons that apply still today. In Jesus' name, amen. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. It was in those times that there was a famine. And because of a famine, Elimelech took his wife, Naomi, and their two sons, Malion and Chilion, and they went to Moab. And sometime after they were in Moab, Elimelech dies. And then her two sons take them two wives of Moab, Orpah and Ruth. And sometime after about 10 years, both sons die. So now Ruth, after at least 10 years, is in the land of Moab. She no longer has a husband, but she has two daughters-in-law. At some point, she hears back in her land, where she came from, that God has blessed that land. There's food there. And so she, along with her two daughter-in-laws, make plans to go to that land. At some point, after they're on this journey, the two daughters-in-law are told by Naomi, y'all need to go back. I cannot provide husbands for you, nor did she even see that as a possibility. And you can see the great emotion that's shown amongst Naomi and Orpah and Ruth in chapter 1, and verse 11 and 12 and 13. Naomi begins to reflect upon her life. And she has concluded, based upon the events that have happened over the past 10 or so years, the end of verse 13, that the hand of Jehovah is against her. Orpah goes back. Ruth clave. She stays with. Naomi makes one last attempt. Your sister-in-law has gone back. You go back as well. And Ruth says, as Brother Jim has pointed out, Turner, these verses in 16 and 17 would be quite applicable to someone getting married. When Ruth says, entreat me not to leave thee and to return from following after thee, for wherever you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. We noted about that we don't know how much Ruth understood about the God of heaven and earth, but she knew enough and had witnessed enough through the life of Naomi that she wanted more of that. She wanted to be a part of that. That was the better route for her at this point, as opposed to going back as her sister-in-law had done. And so Naomi saw that this was the case, and so she made no more attempt to make her go back. They returned to Bethlehem after some time. It causes a great stir. People call her Naomi, which meant what? What did the word Naomi mean? Pleasant. She says, don't call me Naomi, but call me Mara, which meant, and you can continue to see how she feels. For the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, verse 21 of chapter 1, but Jehovah hath brought me home empty. Don't call me Naomi, seeing Jehovah hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me. I ask you, and we didn't answer the question yes or no because we couldn't. But the question that we asked was what Naomi perceives to be the situation, the case with her, that this is what Jehovah has done. We couldn't answer the question, true or false, has he done this? Because we know that he could have, but the Bible just doesn't reveal it. But whether it was true or false, this is exactly how she felt at this point in time. That will become important as we begin to see events unfold in chapter 2. And as verse 22 ends, they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. We might even interject this word, and it just so happened that they arrived in the beginning of the barley harvest. Well, Naomi has a kinsman of her husband's, and what was his name? Boaz. And then we remembered all together last week that Boaz's father was, it's not a fish, but it kind of sounds like it, Salmon, and his mother was Rahab. And if you want a reference on that, Matthew chapter 1 and verse 5 in the genealogy of Christ, exactly how it's mentioned. And so Ruth, after seemingly probably a short time after being back, says to Naomi, let me go glean. And we then concluded that if that was the case, their financial situation was dire. They didn't have much to spare. And so she's going to go out and she's going to work and she's going to gather some food. Let me go out and do this. And of course, Naomi says, go. Verse 3 says that she went out, she gleaned in a field, and her hap, or your version may just read, and it just so happened that she again went to the field that belonged to Boaz. So Boaz comes, he greets his employees kindly, his employees and greet him kindly, and then he asks the question, who is the damsel? As you start looking at not only the relationship between Boaz and Ruth, you'll begin to pick up that there is likely an age difference between the two. That Boaz seemingly is much older than she is. And we'll see a few clues along the way that kind of lets us know that's the case. Well, who is this young damsel? And he says, well, she's the one who came back with Naomi. She's from Moab. And she came and she said, may I glean? And of course, she's been doing that. She did take a break at some point in time. Boaz then addresses Ruth. He says, listen to me. There's no need for you to go anywhere else. You stay here. You stay in this field. Nobody's going to bother you. You'll be secure here. You'll be safe. If you're thirsty, you'll be taken care of. And what was her response based upon the kindness that Boaz showed her? Why? Why? I'm not even from this area. And what was his answer? I've heard all about you. I've heard all about you. I know about the kindness that you showed to your mother-in-law. Wonder why Ruth showed kindness to her mother-in-law. Just because it was the right thing to do. Not because she thought at some point in time, guess what? If I show kindness, maybe somebody will reward me. Just did it. Not only that, you've left your father and your mother. You left the land that you were born in, and you've come to a people that you don't even know. And then he pronounces a blessing upon her. Jehovah recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee by the God of Israel. Now note, under whose wings thou art come to take refuge. And she said, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, for thou hast comforted me. And for that thou hast spoken kindly unto thy handmaid, though I be not as one of thy handmaidens. That's a lot to say. In essence, what she said was, thank you. How simple is that? Sometimes we need to really remember, I'm speaking to myself, that when people say certain things, instead of just going in a different direction with that conversation, to be kind enough to say, thank you. We begin in verse 14, unless anybody has a comment on anything that we've looked at so far. Yes, Brother Jim.
Are you going to talk any more about Rahab in the genealogy? I'm curious to me that the only place you see that is in that Matthew genealogy. And why is that brought out?
Yeah, it's a good question as far as, I mean, again, I'm not sure if I would have said anything else more about it, but he just brings up the point in regards to Rahab and how, again, you don't see much other than when she factored into the children of Israel coming in, and then how that ended up being rewarded, obviously based upon her faithfulness. And then you have Matthew over here recording the genealogy and mentioning Salmon, again, from Rahab, again, bearing Boaz. Other than to point out, to give hope to all of us regarding the lives that sometimes people have lived, and once they've been converted over to the Lord, how that the Lord, Ezekiel 18, remembers no longer their works of sin. Those things are actually, again, as if they never were committed now that they're in relationship with him. So it's just a great part of the story to remember how she's going to factor in, and if we can go one step further, how she'll even factor in when it comes to being in that lineage where the Lord will eventually be born. Yes, Sister Bobby.
I was just going to reinforce what you just said. That was my thought process. All of these areas, when you look at Ruth, and you look at Naomi, you look at Rahab and the relationship there, and you look at Esther, to me, it brings out exactly what you said, that the Lord doesn't look at where you came from, what you've done. He looks at the heart. Even when he looked at David, he's always looking at the heart. And these women were not always in the best situations and circumstances, yet the Lord brings them through.
Yeah.
You said you can see the providence working.
Yeah.
When you look at Ruth, coming from Moab, and you think, why didn't she go back to her family, what she knew before? Obviously, she was in love with her husband, but I think it goes so much deeper. You see that she left that country and she lived with she's taking care of them. She saw something in that family that she valued above everything she had been taught. And she left that and she clung to that. And the Lord rewarded that. I think that's the lesson here that we really look at is the heart of this woman and the value she could. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind anyway, that Naomi was a good Christian woman, and that her family and her husband showed something to Ruth, or these women would have been crying, when their husbands were gone, they didn't return home. They were still with her.
Very, very good point. We mentioned last week, and again, you can even see in the Lord and his life, how that many times you're reading about where he's going from place to place, and seemingly he goes someplace abstract, sort of like out of the way. But when we end up seeing the result of that and who he came in contact with and what happened as a result of it, we know that that wasn't just happenstance, that the Lord just happened to take a side journey, so to speak, and go through someplace. And if you think about God's providential hand over all of this, there's none of these events. That's the most difficult thing for us to comprehend in regard to the world in which we live. That there's none of the events that are going on in the world that have ever gone on that God doesn't have a hand in. I can't figure them all out. I'm not God, and I only live one lifetime. But his hand is in control of all things. And if you want to talk about why did Elimelech and Naomi and two boys leave and go to the land of Moab during the time of a famine, because there was a lady by the name of Ruth down there who was being raised more than likely in an idolatrous home. And she was going to factor in because the Lord knew that once she came in contact with godliness, righteousness, there was going to be something about that attracted her. And he had a plan for her. And you know what? When that family arrived down in Moab, and the very first time she met Naomi or Elimelech or one of these boys, did she have any clue whatsoever where she's going to end up and how she's going to factor in? No. And neither do you and I. Because we can't see the providential hand always in the things that are going on. But I'm going to tell you what, it's going on. And all you got to do is read this to know it's going on, whether I can figure it out or not. And so, yeah, she was attracted to something. And that brought her back to the point where we are now. Kath.
She possibly saw, obviously she saw maybe she was lacking something in her life. And then seeing even Naomi being bitter because of the loss of her husband and sons, but she still returned to God. She kept going towards God.
That's right.
And that made an impression on the thing.
It's exactly right. We talked about it this morning, her and I did. Just the idea, remember how she feels about, how Naomi feels about where she is at this point in time. God's hand is against me. Don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. And even though we may say, man, she is just in a bad state, in what direction has she come? Away or to God? And that's the lesson. That's a lesson for us, and that's a lesson that we pass on when we start meeting people that feel the same way. They're bitter. They're hardened. They think in light of what's going on in their life that God's hand is against them. And you know what? I may not be able to answer that question, yes or no. I don't know. But I can point them in the direction they better go. Not away from. I don't care how better. I don't care how bad you think things are. You know what I'm going to tell them? You go back to God. I don't know how it's going to work out, but it will. It will. That's what we ought to be telling people. And to the point regarding Ruth or anybody else that's been made in the likeness of God, don't forget that no matter where they live and no matter how they've been raised, he made of one every nation of men that they should seek God. There's something inherent in all people to seek him. Well, it's mealtime. And Boaz says to Ruth, come hither, verse 14, chapter 2, eat the bread and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, good spot, and they served her parched grain, and she did eat, and was sufficed, and left thereof. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not. And also put out some for her from the bundles, and leave it, and let her glean, and rebuke her not. So she gleaned in the field until even. She beat out that which she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. She took it up, went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. And she brought forth and gave to her that which was left after she was sufficed. And her mother-in-law said unto her, where hast thou gleaned today? And where hast thou worked? Blessed be he that taketh knowledge of thee. And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, the man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of Jehovah, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, This man is nigh of kin unto us, one of our near kinsmen. And Ruth the Moabitess said, Yea, he said unto me, Thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. And Naomi said unto Ruth her daughter-in-law, It is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, and that they meet thee not in any other field. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean unto the end of barley harvest and of wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. So it was mealtime, and Boaz shows kindness towards Ruth and lets her sit with the reapers. And she eats until she was full, but she also had what? Leftovers. If you didn't like Ruth already, you got to like her now, especially if you like leftovers. I liked her for that. Well, when she was ready to go back to work, meal's over. Boaz then continues to show kindness for her, but he doesn't just necessarily make it easy for her. He just says, let her glean among the sheaves. So now she doesn't have to go to the corners. Now she's not getting the leftovers. They're to pull some up for her, and they're going to leave it on the ground. So she's still going to have to gather those things up. But it would be easier for her to do that. And they're instructed, don't you say a word to her. And you got to believe, well, there's no way they're going to say anything to her based upon the relationship that they have with this man. Jehovah be with you. Brother George said that to me last week. It almost kind of works, George, even though, we don't work together, but I appreciated the effort as I left last week. And of course, they said to him, Jehovah bless thee. So she gleaned in the field until evening. She beat out that which she had gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley, about a 5.5 gallon tub, quite a bit. She took it up, went to the city. Naomi sees what she's gleaned. And of course, now you have her bring in the leftovers. The end of verse 18, Ruth bringing the leftovers to Naomi. And now kind of showing us that the events that happened in the earlier part of chapter 2, when Ruth asked Naomi, can I go out and glean? And Naomi says, yes. So she went in verse 3, and where she went and where she just happened in regard to the field, it wasn't she didn't know where she was going. It just so happened that way, because when she comes back, now Naomi says, well, where did you glean today? So she didn't know where she had gone. Where have you worked? And then she pronounces a blessing on wherever this has been based upon what Ruth has brought back. And so she told her mother-in-law, I worked in the field of a man named Boaz. Can you imagine? Just for a moment, now Naomi begins to process all this. And she says, Blessed be he of Jehovah, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and the dead. What a contrast to chapter 1, verse 13, 20, and 21. Remember how she felt there? The hand of the Lord is gone up against me. Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. Jehovah hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, I came back empty. Jehovah hath testified against me. The Almighty hath afflicted me. And now, based upon what she sees, the events that have unfolded in this one day, blessed be he of Jehovah, who hath not left off his kindness to the living, referring to herself and Ruth, and the dead, referring to her husband and the husband that Ruth had had. And now Naomi says, well, let me tell you something about this man Boaz. He's not just a relative. He is one of our near kinsmen, and we'll understand that more as chapter 3 unfolds. And then Ruth says, well, in addition to everything else, he's just told me, you just hang out in my field. You hang out with my people and everything's going to be okay. And of course, Ruth hears that and she said, well, that sounds like a really good plan. You stay there. So it's exactly what Ruth does. And so in verse 23, you have some time that's going to pass, right? Because remember, they arrived in Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest, chapter 1, last verse. Now she's met Boaz shortly thereafter, still in the beginning of the harvest, because they had to have something to eat. And she's going to continue with Boaz's maidens, not only to the end of the barley harvest, but also to the end of the wheat harvest. And so now you're going to have some weeks passing, and those weeks are going to provide opportunity for Boaz and Naomi, Boaz and Ruth, rather, to get to know one another better. Yes, sir.
I think it's interesting that you spend the first chapter learning about the character of Ruth and Naomi. You spend the second chapter learning about the character of Boaz.
Yeah.
And Boaz goes above and beyond. He does well more than he was obligated to do. And I think that's going to come into play when we see the next chapter coming along. Just kind of have that idea of Boaz does not consider his obligations to be the limit, but the minimum.
Yeah. And then based upon that and the character of Boaz that we have seen obviously come to be shown us, at one point in time, is Boaz living? When the judges judged. And for the most part, what is the character of most men like at this point in time? Well, you remember what happened down in Benjamin, right? To the Levite's concubine. Again, we have to keep the context of these people as they're living during this time. Boaz is going, as was pointed out, above and beyond during a time where men did below and whatever, right? Good point to be made. Anything else as we finish chapter 2? Yes.
In verse 20, the ESV, she actually calls Boaz one of her redeemers.
Yes.
Close kinsman. And I guess you're going back to the
Yes, very good. Uses the word redeemer. Keep that word in mind. You might begin to think of a parallel in using the word redeemer with Boaz and someone else who's so very important to us. Brother George, did you have your hand?
Yeah, just a side note, when you look at, it says an ephah of barley. That was no small amount for somebody out walking around gleaning. You know, Boaz made a point to his reapers, you leave some of those extra sheaves or the heads laying out there. She's not just trying to scrape up grain. And from the best I can tell, she came home with over 60 pounds of barley.
Yeah.
So Naomi's looking at this and saying, so where did you get all this?
That's
now?"
right. That's right.
And things are beginning to look up.
That's right. So you take what Brother George says and what Brother Darrell said in regard to what they're pointing out in regard to Boaz is that he had an opportunity to do good. And you would say, well, not only did good, he did above and beyond. The Lord would say, if someone asks you to go with them a mile, go with them 2. And so the lesson for us is when we do for others, we should do good as we are given opportunity, but we really ought to go above and beyond. And we ought to do that with no expectation of what? See, that's what he taught. That's where the blessings lie there. And I'm not motivated to go do something for Brother Jimmy because I'm hoping Brother Jimmy does at least the same for me or more. I'm to remember what the Lord wrote in Matthew chapter 25, that when we serve and do something for others and go above and beyond, it's though we did it unto him, the Lord. That's what motivates me. And I don't care if anybody else knows about it either. I don't mean that offensively, but that's where the right hand's not supposed to know what? The praise I receive, the glory I receive, the acknowledgement that I receive is that the Lord knows that I did it, whether you do or not. Is that right? It is. That's it. So what a mantra to go above and beyond, right? tomorrow as we serve, we have opportunity to do something for somebody that they go, man, I asked them to do this, and man, they went above and beyond. Well, yeah, that's what we ought to do. Yes.
Sticks out to me too is that you pointed out that Naomi apparently was a good godly Christian woman, and she lost her husband, she lost both of her sons, and she was bitter about it. That shows too that even though we're Christians, that we go through really low times in our life. And what if Ruth had not stayed with her? Would she have continued to be bitter?
Yeah.
You know, Ruth, I think, helped to bring out, help comfort Naomi and bring out, bring about the good again.
Yeah.
I guess I should
Yeah.
say, in her character, and help her realize that God blesses us too.
Yeah.
Yet she was blaming God, it seemed like, taking away, but Ruth helped to comfort her and bring her back to a right state of mind.
You're right. So again, she's reiterating this situation with Naomi and where she found herself. And again, whether she was blaming God or she was just feeling the way she was based upon, there's a lot of the details we don't have. When the decision was made to leave the land, we don't know if she had any say in that in regards to let's not leave, whatever it may be. But the point is, here's the thing, the takeaway from what Julie just said is, the truth of the matter is that in our lifetimes, there are going to be lows. There are going to be difficulties and challenges. We're going to know about it, and we're going to find about it. We're going to find out about it in other people's lives. It's going to be various things. I'm not at the point yet, age-wise, where my health and my age is a difficulty. But if it was, I'm going to tell you what, that could bring me low because I'm not used to not doing what I want to do. And in those kind of situations where I am bitter or on the verge of it, not against God, just life. You know what I need? I need someone there to remind me, well, I'll tell you what, no matter what, you're going to continue to trust in God. Kath and I just talked about that on the way home that no matter what we face, the answer is not turning away from, the answer is continuing to turn to and trust in and obey. That's it. And you would say, well, how do you know how that's going to turn out? I do not know, but I know God does, and I know it'll be okay. Very good. See, we're getting a few things out of this book already, and we're only halfway through. Chapter 3. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? And now is not Boaz our kinsman, in whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself, therefore, and anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee, and get thee down to the threshing floor. But make not thyself known unto the man until he shall have done eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie. Thou shalt go in and uncover his feet and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. And she said unto her, all that thou sayest will I do. Time is passed. Naomi is looking at her daughter-in-law, her situation, and she concludes in her wisdom, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee? That word rest that you see in verse 3, you may have security in your version. Some of your versions say security. It's the same word, chapter 1, verse 9, when Naomi says to her two daughter-in-laws, Jehovah grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of their husband. So if I understand the word there, and then I understand the question, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee? What is she in essence seeking for? What is she talking about? Finding a husband. That's it. That's the context of what's going on. And it just so happens that Boaz, our kinsman, fits the bill. In fact, tonight, he will be winnowing barley in the threshing floor. She gives her instructions on how to prepare herself. I could misinterpret this unless I'm just reading the whole chapter and understanding who's giving the directions and the customs of the day. So she's to clean herself up. She is to make herself presentable. And she's to go, and when he lies down, she's to mark the place, and she is to go and uncover his feet. Hold that thought. She went down, trusting in this advice of Naomi. Is there any reason for her not to trust this woman? None whatsoever. No, it's everything that we've said so far in the example that Naomi has presented to her. The godliness that she has shown. Why would this godly woman now give me any kind of instruction that would be in essence ungodly? Doesn't add up. So she did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down in the end of the heap of grain. She came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. It came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid or startled and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. And he said, Blessed be thou of Jehovah, my daughter. Thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than in the beginning, insomuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not, I will do to thee all that thou sayest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a worthy woman. And now, it is true that I am a near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning that if he will perform unto thee the part of the kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee, as Jehovah liveth. Lie down until the morning. So she does, as instructed. She arrives at the threshing floor. Boaz enjoys a meal. He is satisfied. No doubt he is worn out. He's had a hard day's work, and when he lays down, his heart is merry, happy, content with the hard day's work that he has put in. He goes to lie down to protect that which he has, again, his crop. And about midnight, he's startled because someone is laying at his feet. She has walked in softly, not disturbing. It's dark. They don't have night lights. They don't have city lights. So the first question is, who are you? And she said, I'm Ruth, thy handmaid. And then she says, spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, because she was cold. So what is she asking here? Yeah, make me your wife. Make me your wife. Well, the reason this request is being made is you are a near kinsman. If you looked up that Hebrew word, it's Goel, goal. And you can look back to Leviticus chapter 25 if you want to make a reference on it, and I think it's verse 25. If thy brother be waxed poor and sell some of his possessions, then shall his kinsman that is next unto him come, and shall redeem that which his brother hath sold. That is the word here. So she and Naomi, this is not some plot. Naomi has just come to understand, based upon the events that have happened, wow, not only now does there seem to be something going on relationship-wise, there is a kindness that Boaz is showing Ruth, and Ruth is seemingly, maybe I'm seeing some attraction there as well. They've been spending time together in the harvest. She needs someone to be her husband, and he seems the most fitting in order to do that. In fact, he's got a duty to do it. It's not a plot. She's just thinking about this is how it's supposed to work. So she comes up with this plan. Does she know how this plan's going to work out? No. Could it backfire? Yes. Is it going to? No. And when she says, you are a kinsman to me, he says to her, again, blessed be thou of Jehovah, verse 10. You showed more kindness in this act than before. How? He then goes on to say, you could have had anybody you want, someone your own age. Notice, yeah, you didn't follow after young men, which suggests she's a young woman, and you didn't go after the rich or the poor. You could have had whoever you wanted, but you know who you're showing kindness to? That's greater than the kindness that you've shown before? Boaz. You look at, again, his character. He's not looking at himself like, well, you know what? I deserve this. I don't deserve this. But you've showed great kindness to me. That having this relationship with me is more and means more to you than somebody who's young and somebody who's rich. Yes, sir.
He calls her a worthy woman. I think that he demonstrates himself to be a worthy man at the same time. And I don't think this would have been a safe situation if it was anybody but Boaz. For a woman to show up at the threshing floor like this in the middle of the night.
No doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt as far as it was a dangerous situation. And we're going to see something in regards to that. Brother Darrell points out that, again, he is then going to say, as he ends up verse 11, fear not, I will do all that you say. For all the city of my people doth know that thou art a worthy woman. He calls her that. No doubt he is a worthy man. So when you read that verse, then immediately you thought of Proverbs 30 and a proverb that was written by King Lemuel. That's a trick question. Sorry about that. I set you up for that one. Sorry. King Lemuel. That's right. Proverbs 31, the words of King Lemuel, the oracle which his mother taught him. A worthy woman who can find, for her price is far above rubies. That's what Boaz recognized. He recognized the value of this woman. And then he admits, you're right. I am a near kinsman. I do have that right, but there's somebody else who has right before me. You stay here tonight. Think about that. Begin to think about why he's telling her to stay tonight. Listen, when she came in and she came and laid at his feet, that was an act of submission. And in the custom of the day, that's how it worked. It may still work that way in some countries. And in all honesty, if somebody went down the wrong route saying that there was some kind of plot here and that Ruth did something inappropriate here, she would not have laid down at this man's feet. Now, we'll just leave it at that, but that's the truth of the matter. It was far from that. She's submitting to him, and then she's appealing to him based upon who he is and who she is. And he says, you're right, but there's somebody else. If he will perform the part of a kinsman, okay. But if he won't, I will. And he says, lie down until the morning. Going back to Brother Darrell's point, it would have been dangerous for him to send her away at this point in time. There was nothing inappropriate going on, as we'll see, but he provided security for her already, in that he didn't want her to go back while it was dark. Questions and comments as we get to this point. I thought we'd get to chapter 4. I told you we would, but yes, Sister Julie.
was a way of humbly presenting herself as an option for him for marriage.
That's right.
In some study that we had done before.
That's right. And remember, she approaches him in a submissive way. Just like when she arrived to glean, we noted that she had a right to glean. But how did she approach that? When that head servant told Boaz, well, she came in and she asked, I pray you, may I glean? Naomi has pointed out to Ruth, and now they both understand that she has a right in regards to Boaz. But she doesn't show up at the threshing floor demanding her rights. Submission. Right? Very good. Well, did you have a comment? Yes.
I have a couple thoughts to bring out. There's a lot of background things going on in this passage with the culture of the time and the way that the ancient world often worked. For one thing, the threshing floor in the ancient world, a lot of people would go there to seduce another person because in most cultures, there was a lot of drinking that happened there. That was where you would basically celebrate after you finished the harvest, and you would have the drinking, and thus they wouldn't be of the right mind. Thus, in a lot of cultures, there would be that sort of thing going on. It's very likely that was the case in Moab, which might have been where Naomi might have gotten the concept from. In any case, you have that background that would have meant that he saw her, and that's what would have popped into his mind immediately. You also have that in Numbers 25, the Moabites were had seduced the people of Israel into worshiping of their gods, and also in other ways as well. And that would have had a stigma with it. And you see what Ruth does when she's told to go here. She goes there, doesn't do anything wrong. She just does exactly what she's told. And more than that, when she's asked who she is, she calls herself a maidservant. That is not a Moabite. She made sure she didn't mention that because she knew there would have been a stigma that would have existed. She didn't want that here. What she wanted is what you've been talking about. She didn't want any of these other stigmas that exist in this situation to come in and mess things up as they were trying to do.
Yeah, the point there is a lot going on behind the scenes that we're just not privy to. But as we glance at what we are privy to, what a story. You begin to think about Naomi and Ruth and Boaz, the three main characters at this point in time, as they're beginning to look back at the various decisions that they've made and where they are now based upon those decisions, the things that Naomi sees, the things that Boaz is seeing, and what Ruth is going to see, and how that's going to become even clearer as we, again, get into chapter 4 and we begin to see how they factor into the lineage. I think what's outstanding to me, and I mentioned that this week when I texted Kathy one day, was this is a very simple book. One that no doubt you and I have looked at a number of times. And yet here we are just short of chapter 4. And I'm telling you, my comment about that book prior to that was, first of all, the Bible is just amazing. And Ruth is wonderful. And that's the way it is. Here we have studied a book. We're coming back to it again. And we're seeing things that maybe we hadn't seen before, or we're just understanding them better. And hopefully, as we prayed, we're seeing the application to our lives and how it can make us better people as well. Because the Word of God, the 119th Psalm reminds us, is timeless. Timeless. We will pick up with verse 14. I really think we can finish next week, but there's some things in there I do not want to get in a hurry about. You're kind of thinking, well, what could we spend so much time in chapter 4? Well, come back next week and we'll see.